Right, and there we have Treasury CS Yatani holding the briefcase, which is always held at this time of the year regarding the budget. And right now he should be starting the procession from the Treasury at Harambee Avenue all the way to the National Assembly, that's the Parliament buildings, where he will be tabling the budget estimates, proposed, I should say, budget estimates for the financial year 2021-22. These expenditure estimates should be covering the period between July 2021 and June 2022. And the man you're seeing on your screen, Ukur Yatani, is flanked by the CAS for Treasury. And their work is clearly cut out given the sort of challenges the economy is facing at this time. The intention is to mobilize as much as 2 trillion shillings in revenue against an expenditure outlay of 3.6 trillion shillings. And of course, we've already had a conversation regarding the deficit. We have seen PS Muya joining the camera shoot there. He has also been quite instrumental in this budget preparation process. And so right now we expect that they will be heading to the National Assembly, where the tabling of the budget and appropriations bill should be taking place. CS Ukur Yatani has already indicated a few things regarding this budget as far as the financing of the COVID-19 stimulus is concerned, issues such as debt service obligations, and many other engagements regarding the Big Four agenda. So we're just about to get to the crunch of the moment where the budget will be tabled before the National Assembly. You'll remember that on Tuesday this week, there was a lot of engagement in Parliament regarding the delay in the disbursements of CDF funds and what that could potentially mean as far as MPs endorsing this budget statement is concerned. So that is something we shall be keenly watching. And to see any other emerging issues regarding the budget for the next financial year, we certainly have seen the Finance Bill of 2021, which among other things has a number of proposals regarding VAT, regarding excise duty as well, as the government seeks to ramp up its tax revenue collection to be able to finance the expenditure plan for the next financial year. This is widely expected by many Kenyans to be a recovery budget, given the challenge that the economy had last year when it slumped into recession between the second and the third quarters following the adverse effects of COVID-19. One of the sectors which has been adversely hit has been the tourism sector, and of course many stakeholders are looking forward to see whether there will be any additional stimulus extended in light of the situation being faced by the country. So Treasury CS there with his entire team getting ready to head over to the National Assembly, where the tabling of the budget for the next financial year will be taking place this afternoon. And Alex Mwangi, my colleague, is in the National Assembly. Alex Mwangi, just give us a sense of what the mood is like at the Parliament buildings, even as they anticipate CS Yatani to get there anytime now.
Thank you very much, Julians. And this is wall-to-wall coverage of Budget 2021-2022. And right now I'm joined by the chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Kanini Kega, who will tell us a sneak peek of what he expects from this budget. Kanini, maybe one of the things that many people are asking is how is Ukur Yatani going to finance this budget?
One, I want to say that Ukur, or the CS National Treasury, will only come here in the National Assembly to give the budget highlights and also the revenue raising measures. We are the ones doing the budget under Article 221, and we have not actually concluded the making of the budget because it's a process, and we are hoping that by next week we will be able to do the appropriations together with the appropriations bill so that now it becomes an act. But having said that, of course, it's a concern for everyone about the fiscal deficit, which is about 957 billion shillings, because our budget is about 3 trillion. The other thing is about 3.6, but basically it's about 3 trillion. And from the ordinary revenue, appropriations in aid, we are going to get about 2 trillion. So there will be a deficit of 957 billion shillings. And today, Waziri will be here to tell us how he is going to get that 957. And from the report that we have in the House, he had proposed that you get, of course, funding from the local market, and also from the international front. And we want to be very candid with him that if we have to raise taxes, if we need to get more taxes, then it's not prudent to overtax the already, the already compliant Kenyans. We are told that there are a huge percentage of Kenyans who are doing business, who are also employed, but they don't pay their rightful taxes. That is what we want to see. We want to see a situation whereby, because we have already enabled KRA, we have given them money to employ more staff. We have given them money to buy more equipment, the scanners at our port of entry. We want to see that with all the goods that come into the country, Kenyans, or the traders are able to pay the requisite dues. If we are able to pay the requisite dues, we know for sure that we will be able to reduce that deficit by about half, because we are told that about 800 billion shillings remains uncollected in terms of taxes.
Okay. Maybe I'll just request to politely cut you off because, in fact, Ukur is just leaving Treasury and he will be here in just a few minutes. But thank you for that information. Yes, and so right now we will just follow up on what Ukur Yatani, his progress in coming to Parliament buildings, and we are going to keep you. We're going to keep you updated on what is happening here in Parliament. It's back to you, Julians, in studio.
Many thanks, Alex Mwangi, getting to us from the National Assembly. On your screen, you can see the convoy led by CS Ukur Yatani heading from the National Treasury to the National Assembly. And the symbolism of this entourage going to the National Assembly is that finally, when all is said and done, it is the legislative arm of government which is tasked with the job of oversight of appropriations and allocations as far as the budget is concerned. The Treasury, what it does is to get all the proposed estimates from the various MDAs and put them together and then make proposals to this regard, because it is the legislators, I should say, who have the sovereign mandate now to be able to pass the proposed estimates. And that is why this is particularly important, that we have the executive now going to the National Assembly, which is the legislative arm, to table the budget proposals. Remember, at this point, they are proposals. They still have to deliberate it on. And that's exactly what my colleague was sharing with the chairperson of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Kanini Kega, regarding the significance of this afternoon. And therefore, this is why this is taking place. We have CS Ukur Yatani there heading to the National Assembly to table the budget estimates for the financial year 2021-22. And we shall come now to studio with my two guests. We are delighted to have Robert Waroiru, who's still with us. We still have the pictures there on screen. And also now we are joined by the head of research at Genghis Capital, Churchill Ogutu. You shall be able to see him shortly once we get off the convoy by CS Ukur Yatani. Gentlemen, there is something which Chairperson Kanini Kega has mentioned, which I think is very important. He said, remember, he's going to table highlights. We are the ones, according to the Constitution, who are doing the budget. Just to quote what he said to my colleague. Let me start with you, Churchill. I listened to him, and I remember reading the report which came 2 days ago from the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Parliament is really trying to stamp its authority as far as the budget-making process is concerned.
Yes, thanks, Julians. It is, but as per the Budget and Appropriation Committee chair, it's according to the Constitution, ultimately they're the ones who have the final say in regards to the budget that is tabled initially by the Treasury, which were draft budget estimates. And after the Budget and Appropriation Committee report is when now at least what the highlights will be the final estimates, but still in line with what the Budget and Appropriation Committee had recommended. But having said that, I think that at some point there's a bit of some chest thumping from Parliament in regards to the budget. Why am I saying this? If you look at the issue to do with the debt in the country, it's the elephant in the room. But ultimately, you find that where we are at 7.3 trillion shillings, and even the debt servicing in the next financial year, it's quite elevated at 1.17 trillion. So Parliament is the one which approved the budgets that led us to where we are right now. So they also have to take that bone of the share, because what we see is there's a bit of some taking it back, that Treasury is the one which took us to where we are. But ultimately, Parliament, which still within the Constitution, is the one which approves the budget, and it's still the one which has taken us to where we are right now.
Robert, some quick thoughts regarding what Chairperson Kanini Kega said.
Yeah, I think what the chairperson was saying there really is that budget making is a political and legal process. So in the sense that it's political, National Treasury, you give us your estimates or consolidate those estimates. Then we as Parliament, and particularly as BAC, we will talk to the relevant committees and ensure that we get their input. And then we'll consolidate that into a policy document which National Assembly can debate, can consider and debate, and then pass the relevant laws. Remember, you will not be able to implement these provisions from a tax perspective if it's not passed by Parliament. And I think that's where the chairperson was coming from, saying, well, you'll give us your proposals, but we will make the budget, because at the end of the day, it's us who will then determine how we're going to reallocate some of these resources. You've seen in that report they were saying we got an additional 85 billion request, but we couldn't accommodate that. And that speaks to a portion of trying to control or manage the budget making process.
Churchill, before you came, I asked Robert a question. Aside from what we've seen in the finance bill, do you expect there will be any surprises this afternoon? Because in my view, the CS really has very little wiggle room if you consider the thinned out fiscal space as far as manipulating tax here and there is concerned.
I doubt that there'll be any surprises that will come in terms of the revenue raising measures from the fact that the finance bill is already out there in the public. It was already subject to public participation. So I think now the ball is on one of the other committees in Parliament, that's the Finance Committee, to give also its recommendation. So I don't think at this point in time that we'll get any new measures in regards to revenue raising measures for the budget for the next financial year outside what is already there. Of course, there are some other measures that are expected to kick in from the fact that some of them had been proposed in previous finance acts, things to do with LPG and whatnot. So in terms of new measures, I'm not seeing anything. Of course, the assumption, even as we look at the issues or what surprises will come, is now the issue to do with the assumptions that is underpinning even the revenue estimates. Remember that we're coming from the current financial year, which the ordinary revenue estimate is at 1.59 trillion. We are getting to 1.78 trillion. So that's a difference of 181 billion. Yeah. But of course, the finance bill by itself will not, the proposals in the finance bill for this year and also the previous years, which are expected to kick in the next financial year, by themselves will not take us to 181 billion. So there's that underlying assumptions that because last year was bad on paper, we still don't have the hard number for 2020 GDP growth, but there's still that assumption that next year, next financial year, there'll be an uptick in growth. And that is what even the government is saying that they'll be able to get the revenue from. Of course, the chairman for the budget committee said that they are relying on tax administration issues. This is something that we've been hearing fiscal year in, fiscal year out. I don't know how successful it will be this time round, because I haven't seen any new measures or how KRA is empowered to come up with some ways of ensuring that the slippages that we've been seeing in any given financial year have been sealed, so that they can be able to realize the revenue estimates. So looking forward to what the CS will tell us.
But surely, Churchill, just to stay with you briefly, is that if you read the finance bill, and we had this conversation with Robert before, a proposal such as widening KRA's audit period from 5 to 7 years clearly is trying to ensure that at least it can go as far back and to be able to close some of the revenue which right now might be falling through the cracks. Yes,
but we look at it in the context from the regime that we are in right now. How successful have the tax audits, even going back to 5 years, have been? Even before we start thinking about now extending it further to 7 years, how successful has it been? I don't know whether Robert has insights in regards to those the tax audits. So the rationale of now expanding that tax audits deadline or the timelines to a further 2 years, what success are they looking at? So those are some of the things that are creeping top of my head.
Robert, how successful have they been? Might you have an insight into this?
Yeah, certainly. In fact, if you look at when iTax came into place, there was a period when Kenya Revenue Authority sort of stopped doing audits, and in fact, it was more risk-driven. In other words, we look at a certain taxpayer, we determine that this is a risky taxpayer, and let's go and audit them. Otherwise, we'll expect them to all comply on this iTax platform, which I should say, by the way, is one of the brilliant inventions or innovations by Revenue Authority. In fact, I was just reading during the break that Nigeria has also come up with a similar platform and wants taxpayers to pay. So what we have seen is that Revenue Authority has now started focusing again on audits. And the whole idea there is we think that there are certain segments of the society or the economy that are not contributing their fair share of the economy. So for example, if you think about the financial services sector, that's a sector that is heavily audited and contributes a significant portion of the tax revenues in this country. However, by contrast, the agricultural sector is big in terms of the economy, but in terms of contribution to the taxman's kitty, not a significant contribution. And you've also seen in the finance bill, there are proposals to enable Revenue Authority audit multinationals. So all these are geared towards administrative support of Revenue Authority so that in years to come, Revenue Authority will not have an excuse to say we did not have capacity. You've seen in the press KRA, going out to hire additional investigators, and it speaks to what Honorable Kega was talking about, that they want to drive a lot more people to pay taxes, and if it means investigating people, then Revenue Authority will do that and is building that capacity.
Kanini Kega spoke about the widening of the tax base, and sitting in my position, I really have to sympathize because as we had discussed before, Churchill, we've tried presumptive tax, we've tried turnover, we've tried minimum tax, which is now subject to a legal process. Do you think, or what do you expect as far as widening this tax base is concerned?
Well, I think we have reached wit's end in terms of trying to bring everyone on board. Looking at even the proposals in the Finance Act, Finance Bill 2021, I don't see any more something which is substantive in terms of bringing those people who are not even in the current tax bracket on board. So, of course, the issue regarding the minimum tax is still subject to law, and that also had been front-loaded with this issue about tax laws carry forward, which had been proposed to be repealed. So, I don't know whether let me not speculate something that is a matter of the court, this issue to do with minimum tax, if it doesn't see the day of light, and right now we are removing this proposal of tax carry forward. So what does that mean? So those are some of the things that are just struggling to understand. But having said that, back to your question, I don't see that the KRA or the policymakers have been able to find ways of bringing those people who are not taxed into the tax bracket.
Let me just remind you that on your screen you can see the convoy led by CS Yatani is making its way from the National Treasury to the National Assembly, where he's expected to be tabling, should be tabling the annual budget. The Finance Committee is on standby to receive him. We have seen from afar there, you can see the leader, we can see Amos Kimunya, I should say, who is a former finance minister, I should remind us, because he has previously served in this capacity. We also saw Kanini Kega a little earlier, who is the chairperson of the BSE committee, quite significant, and they just issued a report regarding the estimates which are tabled by the National Treasury for the next financial year. You can see them there, and that's the entire team, really. You can see Amos Kimunya, you can see Kanini Kega. This entirely tells us that we are quite set as far as the tabling of the budget is concerned. Anytime they'll be receiving him, and then they walk him right into the chamber where this should be tabled. Just to remind you the key figures, 3.6 trillion shillings projected expenditure, revenues at some 2.04 trillion shillings, and the deficit somewhere hovering around 957 billion shillings, which has been quite the headache. And Robert, maybe just briefly, Kanini Kega spoke to the issue of debt, and is there anything Parliament can do at this point? Because I don't anticipate they will make an attempt to rationalize the expenditure estimates being tabled.
No, it's very unlikely that they would try and rationalize further, I might add, this expenditure estimate. So it's unlikely that we're going to see any new surprises there. And like we discussed earlier on today, really the conversation will be creating additional headroom for any unforeseen expenditure that might come through, for example, in supplementary budgets. So in terms of any significant changes in this budget, whether from a tax raising perspective or expenditure perspective, I really doubt that we're going to see anything different from what's already in the public domain.
Churchill, there's been so much talk online and across the country regarding what lies ahead for the country as far as the debt ceiling is concerned, and what that potentially means for Kenya's public finance management framework. Many are of the view that you can't keep on toying with the debt ceiling like it's just something which you change at whim. Do you see a threat to Kenya's PFM framework?
Yes, in the sense that as at the end of March, public debt stock was at 7.3 trillion and is expected to end this month at 7.7 trillion. Of course, there are some inflows that are expected to come in, but more likely than not will end at 7.7 trillion. At the 957 billion that Honorable Kanini Kega has mentioned, so we are looking at 8.6 trillion by the end of the next financial year.
Exactly.
But there are still financial years that will come after that. It's not that the end of the financial year of next year will not accumulate debt. That's far from the truth. So more likely than not, there's that scope of now raising the public debt ceiling from the 9 trillion shillings that it is currently. But that also brings some credibility issues because the public debt, this regime, from the metric that was there, 50% of the GDP, to an aggregate number of 9 trillion shillings, which was passed how many years ago? 2.5 years ago. And then right now we are in the debate of now extending it further. So what does that mean? Every 2 years, 3 years, we'll be doing the same game, or what does that mean? So that also negates even the whole PFM framework. Do we really have to get to this route whereby we have a public debt ceiling, or we just say, okay, clearly we're not adhering to that, we just continue borrowing, but now we just look at ways of how we'll be able to at least have sustainable debt. So the discourse now gets away from the public debt stock and also sustainability of the debt, looking at even the debt servicing in the next coming years. How sustainable will it be as we continue servicing the debt amidst the budget requirements? And so those are the things that will now come at the forefront outside even the public debt ceiling, because clearly we're not adhering to it.
Robert?
Yeah, so I also think that there's a real challenge.
Robert, let me just cut you briefly and say that CS Ukur Yatani is arriving at the National Assembly there. You can see he is being ushered in by the security detail there. Now, from here, I mean, it's just to walk into the chamber and table the budget. Of course, there will be some camera shots being taken just before that is done. But now this is the moment we have been waiting for, where we see the Treasury Cabinet Secretary arriving there. He is. CS Ukur Yatani hoisting the famous briefcase, telling us that any time from now, we should be listening to him tabling the budget speech. And there he is making his way towards the main building of the Parliament. The man clearly with a lot of work in the build-up. There he is with Amos Kimunya, as well as the chairperson of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. We can see Honorable Mbadi there. And clearly, this is a very significant moment, because the estimates being tabled right now come within the context of the COVID-19 and the necessity of a recovery. Also, expenditure towards the Big Four agenda, and many focusing on this, given that the current government is really getting to the final year of this term as it is structured constitutionally. You can see some executives from the National Treasury also joining there. So we wait now for the Treasury CS to make his way there. I wonder whether the chat he's having with Kanini Kega is regarding the BSC report, which was issued 2 days ago, and some of the scathing comments that were made around Treasury's capabilities. And Robert, I was asking, do you see any threats to the PFM framework?
Yeah, certainly, in the sense that if we continue, borrowing, there's a question of sustainability, and that debate has already been going on. And so the question is, at what point do we start scaling back? And possibly one of the considerations is, if we're borrowing for development expenditure, are these projects now starting to pay off so that we sort of retire that debt and in future